What up, doe? Sometimes our interests are woven into the fabric of who we are. Temptation has its place and power. Our actions, attractions are sometimes similar to those of our ancestors, whether it be relatives from recent generations past or relatives that walked the American soil in antiquity. A couple words that might prove useful during this show. We'll go through those. Duck it. It's funny how a lot of these words we used to use and may have considered them slang, not knowing that all the time they were a part of the American lexicon. I remember hearing ducats many, many times. Let's shake it, duck it. Generally, an unspecified coin, a piece of money, cash. And this is from OED.com, Oxford English Dictionary, the online version. Ducat gold, 1548. Gold of high purity, as used for making ducat coins. How many of y'all heard ducats or said ducats before, or heard someone a little older than you say ducats or younger? This is from Oxford English Dictionary. Ton, T-U-N, ton. A large cask or barrel. A large vessel in general, a tub or vat, a chest. And that's from 1225 to 1601. And a large cask or barrel, it's Old English. A ton of gold, 1603, is 100,000 guilders, florins, of gold. Ton, T-O-N, 1379, a measure of weight, now generally 20 CWT, in Great Britain legally 2,240 pounds, in the United States and elsewhere, for most purposes, 2,000 pounds. So now we go to Abe Books. Just for reference, just to be a little more familiar with the source we're going to use. This is the book America by John Ogilvy. And as you can see, I highlighted the word America, and all the text that follows is also the title. It's a very long title. And this book, the first edition, John Ogilvy, 1671. This book is, I just pulled up one of the first cost of it. I didn't dig super deep and try to get all these different numbers of what it's being sold for. Now, you can also go to the Library of Congress and they have a first edition copy. But this particular, and you can also go to Amazon and get this book for probably $20 or $15 or something like that. I don't know, but um, things will be omitted and the illustrations won't be as accurate. So this used first edition America 1671 John Ogilvy is selling for $58,500. Collected from the most authentic authors, augmented with later observations, and adorned with maps and sculptures by John Ogilvy, Esquire, His Majesty's cosmographer, geographic printer, and master of the rebels in the Kingdom of Ireland, London, printed for the author 1671, first edition, first issue in English of this classic early work on the Americas, including one of the first views of New York City. America. I'm sure many of you have seen these illustrations. They are used widely for good reason. And the book, as we saw, is selling for first edition $58,500. What do you think the reason is for that? America being an accurate description of the New World containing the original of the inhabitants, the remarkable voyages thither, the conquest of the vast empires of Mexico and Peru, their ancient and later wars with their several plantations, many and rich islands, their cities, fortresses, towns, temples, mountains, and rivers, their habits, customs, manners, and religions, their peculiar plants, beasts, birds, and serpents. John Ogilvy, Esquire. Page 13. But above all this, it is certain that America to this day, notwithstanding almost innumerable thousands of Indians formerly slain and massacred by the Spanish, is so well inhabited that it may stand in competition with either Asia or Europe. The Americas. Hieronymus Benso relates that he stood amazed at the gold and silversmiths in the territory of Chito, who without any iron tools made images in all manner of vessels, which work they performed thus. First they made an oval crucible of a good lock, round about passed with earth, embodied with the powder of wood coals, which crucible being baked very hard in the sun, they fill with pieces of gold and silver, and put in the fire, about which standing with 5, 6, or more pipes made of canes, they blow the fire so long till the metal melts, which others fitting on the ground run it into molds of black stone, and so with little trouble cast into what shape they please. This is page 45. The king of Guacanario gave testimony that some rivers flowing from the tops of high mountains washed down the gold amongst the sand. It says Hayton, Hayton, or Haiti. Give you an idea of where we are, what we're talking about, what they considered to be the Americas. Hayton or Haiti. Meanwhile, Columbus returned in safety to Spain and was received with great joy, King Ferdinand making him admiral of the sea and sending his brother Bartholomew governor to Hayti, now called Hispaniola. The gold, parrots, mesquite, aloes, and strange bread, yucca, whose extracted juice is rank poison, but the body makes good meal, which kneaded and baked yields a fine manchet and wholesome food. They looked upon with great delight and admiration, but two of the natives being naked, with gold rings through their noses and ears, ornaments with them of high esteem, and signifying their no mean quality, the people old and young came in throngs to wonder at, never weary of gazing upon them. But the king, encouraged by the success, took no dilatory course, but suddenly, and before any could expect, built 14 stout caravels and 3 frigates, and as soon manned them with 1,200 soldiers, besides a great number of artificers of all sorts, with their wives and children, freighting them with horses, swine, goats, cattle for breed, all sorts of European corn to sow, fruit trees and vines to plant, and some priests to instruct and convert the natives to their religion. They looked upon with great delight and admiration, but two of the natives being naked with gold rings through their noses and ears. Who wears gold rings through their noses and ears in the Americas? Nothing against those who may term themselves Native Americans. But let's speak about those others who look like you. At what age did you get a gold earring in your ear, or a gold earring in your nose, a hoop, a stud? Page 58. These illustrations are of Americans. I know. They look different from what you're used to. The Voyage of Vincent Agnes Pinzon. Pinzon discovered a wide but shallow river, where landing on a hill he met a great company of Americans. He, to invite them to trade, threw them a shell, in return for which they cast him a lump of gold, which when the Spaniard went to take up, they all fell upon him, and indeed he could not have defended himself long. Pinzon discovered a wide but shallow river, where landing on a hill he met a great company of Americans. He, to invite them to trade, threw them a shell, in return for which they cast him a lump of gold, which when the Spaniard went to take up, they all fell upon him, and indeed could not have defended himself long. Of course not. A group of y'all? Psst. Page 60, the expedition of Americus Vespucius. Americus Vespucius, a Florentine, commanded 4 ships fitted out at King Ferdinand's charge, set sail the 20th of May, anno 1497, and refreshing at the Canaries, Look up where the Canary Islands are. From thence he steered to Pariah, where he so much gained upon the inhabitants, that for pens, bells, looking glasses, and other trifles, they daily brought aboard in barter great store of gold, the best of merchandise. These people, both men and women, go stark naked, not so much as covering their pudenda, their complexion swarthy. Look up swarthy. They shave all of their hair, and only some women leave a tuft on their heads. Only some women leave a tuft on their head. Sidebar: I have a line of relatives, very close relatives, named Tuft. They much exceeded the Europeans in running and swimming, insomuch that the women, oftentimes without any boats or floating pieces of timber, venture 2 or 3 leagues into the sea. 2 or 3 leagues into the sea, which is like a mile and a half. They have so great skill in shooting that they exceed almost all other nations, having arrows headed with sharp fish bones. They also use lances and clubs. The women follow the men in wars and serve instead of horses to carry ammunition and other necessities, to which labor they are so used that they will bear on the shoulders 40, nay 50 leagues together, such luggage as 3 Spaniards are scarce able to lift from the ground. This makes it hard to believe that all your imagination, your imagining of these dainty little women who just follow, not saying they don't follow, but these dainty little women who all they do is make sandwiches. This is paints quite a different picture. Let's shake it. They bring forth children with little or no pain, and wash them in a river so soon as born, which done, they return to their usual work and business. They bring forth children with little or no pain, and wash them in a river so soon as born, which done, they return to their usual work and business. When they are incensed again, their husbands, they revenge themselves by poisoning their children. They bring forth children with little or no pain. Can you relate to that? Ladies, can you relate to that? They bring forth children with little or no pain, and wash them in a river so soon as born, not with their legs on stirrups and pushing them out, artificial light, sterile environment, stranger, pulling them out, grab them, go poke them, weigh them, lay them on some cold metal thing to know how much they weigh, and then possibly bring them back to you. They bring forth children by themselves. They didn't mention a staff. They never mentioned a staff. They bring forth children with no pain, little or no pain, and wash them in a river so soon as born, which done, they return to their usual work and business. When they are incensed against their husbands, when they pissed at their husbands, when they got issues with their husbands, they revenge themselves by poisoning their children. Who passionate like that? Who got that much fire? Or as you may say, anger. Their riches consist in feathers of diverse colors, strings of fish bones intermingled with green and white beads, with which they adorn their heads, arms, legs, ears, and cheeks. Gold and pearls they make little account of. Page 90. What page is this? It's difficult to read. This is page 91, I believe. For the kings which formerly acknowledged Montezuma for their sovereign gave him a yearly revenue, most of which were valued to be worth 23 ton of gold. 71. But Nunez, leaving his sick and weary men and with Chiapas, marched quite another way back than he came, and crossing a great river, was received by Prince Tiancha, who furnished him with gold, pearls, provisions, and guides, which carried his luggage and goods. In the province of Banoniama, the Spanish enriched themselves with chains and breastplates of gold, which in great plenty hung on the walls in every house. In the province of Bananiama, the Spaniards enriched themselves with chains and breastplates of gold, which in great plenty hung on the walls in every house. So the Spanish, they're copying off the Americans. The Americans didn't, gold to the Americans was similar to anything that the soil, that the earth, that the mountains, that the water, that was produced. Just like the people. The gold it wasn't a big deal. The value was similar to the value of any adornment. And it tells you because they in great plenty hung on the walls in every house. But the Spanish, copying off of the indigenous Americans, enriched themselves with chains and breastplates of gold. Yeah, they trying to get Dougie. They trying to get fly. 93, page 93. For the country being full of woods and mountains might hide many of his enemies, but he not regarding the advice. When a journey from New Granada, you know where that is? Went a journey from New Granada, and having marched 50 leagues easterly, he crossed into the river Sucre with 60 Spaniards, and was presented by the princes of the country with as much gold as amounted to 7,000 ducats. Because the governor, Camachiran, and his deputy, notwithstanding he had given Gutierrez as much gold when he came first into the country as amounted to 7,000 ducats, as we mentioned before, yet was put in prison by his order. Contrary to all promises, nay, Gutierrez threatened to burn him, not regarding that he had besides received of him several pieces of gold, resembling all manner of beasts, as tigers and others. and also fishes and fowls, curiously wrought, which were valued at 2 tons of gold. Yet this present seemed too little for him, whereupon bringing the prisoner to a chief, he swore that he would roast him if in 4 days' time he did not furnish him with 4 times as much more gold as that chest would hold. Wow. They presented them with pieces of gold resembling all manner of beasts, as tigers and others, fishes and fowls, goldsmiths. Very skilled Americans. 96, page 96, America, John Ogilvy, 1671, first edition, selling for upwards of $50,000. Here, Almagro coming to Pizarro with fresh forces, they made no little penetration into Peru. We're talking Peru. Satisfying everywhere their thrift of gold and slaughtering the toothless Tambizes, a people who, having offended their king, had by his order the upper teeth of the whole nation beaten out. Brutal. That Alvarado, upon the receipt of 100,000 ducats, should have his men and Almagro and depart from Peru, with which sum being enriched, he soon after fitted out 14 sail to discover new countries to the west. But being busy in his preparations, was sent for to Mexico by Don Antonio Mendoza, the viceroy, to undertake a voyage with him to the new discovered country of Cibola, abounding in gold and saffron, according to the report of 4 Dominican monks, and having already raised 700 men, news came to Mexico that Peter Zúñiga had received and overthrown by the Indians of Salisco. Y'all familiar with Salisco? Look up a map of Mexico and go to Salisco. Had received and overthrown by the Indians of Salisco. Those people you call Afro-Mexicans, Afro-Latinos, those are the people in these illustrations, in some of these illustrations. And as you can see, we haven't heard anything about Guinea or Africa, to whose assistance Alvarado marched with all speed and found the Indians encamped on a high mountain, fortified with conjoined trees and great stones tied together with rushes, behind which they were secure from shot. Page 97. Soto sent a message to Atabaliba that the Spaniards desired peaceably to treat with him, to which he received answer that no peace could be made unless they restored the gold and silver to the owners, which they had plundered from them, and forsook his territories, which so doing they should have audience the next day. Hereupon the Bishop Vincent de Villa Veridi was conducted into the royal palace in the city of Caxmalca, and brought before Atabaleba, who came thither in great state with a guard of 25,000 men. He was carried on the shoulders of his prime nobles in a sedan, about which hung garlands of gold and diverse colored feathers. 105. The expedition of John Ribault, Renatus Laudonnière, and Gurgi. Florida, where some of y'all people from, Florida being upon the continent of America and so called by John Pontus, who landed there upon Palm Sunday, though Sebastian Gaboda, a Venetian employed by Henry VII, King of England, landed there before, may well be termed the Europeans' bloody stage, Pontus being slain here, but Ferdinand Soto exercised against the inhabitants inhumane cruelty 5 years together, yet at last died of a deep discontent because he could not reach his aims, having condemned so many Floridians fruitlessly to dig for gold in the mines. At the charge of Charles the Ninth, King of France, wherewith having sailed 30 degrees northern latitude, he came before the promontory of Francisco, where he ran up into the mouth of a wide river, to which he gave the denomination of Dolphin, upon whose banks were whole mulberry woods, which nourished silkworms in strange abundance. Seriously, how many of y'all ever heard anything about silkworms? Y'all might have heard some silkworms on the Silk Road. Y'all might have heard silkworms in Asia. Very interesting stuff. From hence he sailed by the Wolf's Head, a point so called because great numbers of wolves breed there. Great numbers of wolves breed there in Florida, and leaving the Cedar Island landed on Florida, where he built a triangular fort, and having furnished it with men, guns, and provisions, they got their hammers, sailed back for more supplies to France, but coming thither found all things in disorder, occasioned by a war amongst themselves, so that the French which guarded and dwelt in the fort waited in vain for relief, and their provisions growing scant, thought it fittest and their best way to build a vessel and sail from thence, which having effected and being gone about the third part of their voyage, there happened such a calm for 20 days that they made not the least way, which drove them to so great extremity, their provisions being spent, that they drank their own urine. The French, they're drinking their own urine, and fed upon their old shoes, which also in a short time failing, they agreed amongst themselves to kill and eat one of their seamen, called Henry Lacker, on whose flesh they lived some days. But being again driven to the greatest want imaginable, in this extremity of desperation, their condition being altogether hopeless, an English frigate discovering them, and observing by their manner of sailing that they were in some great want, drawing near, sent their longboat aboard, and found them so weak that they were not able to handle their tact, whereupon generously taking pity of them, they relieved them and conducted them to the coast of England, and then brought them to Queen Elizabeth, who had formerly designed to rig a fleet for Florida. Page 106, the natives ascribed this plague to the French cannons, by which means they stood in great feat amongst themselves. For a seaman named Rubel Patracon, pretending to have skill in necromancy, would undertake to show the places where the gold and silver mines were, which the rest of the seamen, believing, rebelled against Laudonnière, and thought sick, imprisoned him, forcing him to sign a writing to this effect: that the two ships of which the rebels made Vassar and Tricant commanders should with his leave and permanent fail to New Spain for provisions. New Spain, Mexico. Whilst they were preparing for their voyage, Rupert Ferrer, having been sent to the king Utina, came back with many rich presents, and withal brought information of the gold and silver mines, Appalachia. This is America. This ain't no video. Kinda. 126. Those therefore of the northern America, that as near as can be we may bring many into one, seem most fitly described in this following order: Estoitland, Terra Laboratorius, or Nova Britannia, Canada, Nova Francia, Nova Scotia, Nurembergua, New England, New Netherland, now called New York, as being in the possession of the English, Maryland, Appalachian, now called Virginia, Carolina, Florida, Yucatan, Guatemala, containing Chiapa, Verapaz, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Veragua, Guatemala, properly so called, the Kingdom of Mexico or New Spain, containing the Archbishopric of Mexico, Mequacan, Tlaxcala, Guaxata, Panuco, Tabasco, New Galicia, containing Guadalajara, Jalisco, Chiametla, Culiacan, Sinaloa, Zacatecas, New Biscay, New Mexico, Cibola, wherein are mentioned Tantanteac and Nova Granada, Quivira, to which by most authors is added California, which being an island, we thought fit to reserve to be spoken of among the islands, as also Terra Nova or Newfoundland, which last lies utmost east, as the other west of North America. The islands of North America are Terra Nova or Newfoundland, the island of Assumption, the Bermudas or Summer Islands, Hispaniola, St. John, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, the Lucayes, the Caribbees, being 28 in number, the Isle of Sotavento, Trinidad, and California, the biggest of all the American islands. California, the biggest of all American islands. 127. For Estoitland is by some as largely taken as Canada, by Cluverius, Gaunitzius, Peter Duval, and others, namely for all the tract of land extending from the supposed Strait of Ansan, which divides America from Asiatic Tartary, as far as the utmost point of land that shoots toward the Atlantic Ocean, which southerly towards Terra Laboratoria is bounded with a river vulgarly called Rio Nevado, or the Snowy River, as Stoitland seems to have derived its name from its laying more easterly than the rest of the provinces, and according as Nova Britannia is placed in some charts, might very well be taken for the same, though it hath not been so termed by an author, but rather Terra Laboratoris. Quarteriatis and Nova Britannia are generally received to be all one. This province is affirmed by Matthias Quadus and J. Antonius Maginus to have been the first discovered country of the New World, and that by Antonius Zeno, a patrician of Venice, in the year of our Lord 1390, which was long before the expedition of Columbus, through the encouragement of Zygmus, king of the Isle of Friesland. But by whomsoever found out, or at whatsoever time, it is commonly affirmed to be not ill furnished with provisions of all sorts, as beasts, birds, fish, fowl, and fruits, having a soil indifferent fertile in respect of the coldness of the climate, the people in general, for some there that live wild and savage up and down the woods and go naked, whereas the clothing of the country is the skin of beasts and of sea calves called morses, are reported not only tolerably civil, but also ingenious and expert both in mechanic arts and other necessary faculties, insomuch that the first voyagers to this place are said to have observed of them upon this first discovery, that they sowed corn, brewed beer and ale, and traded by sea to Greenland, Friesland, and other places, to the distance of 1,500 miles. Page 319. Monte Cristo, one of the ports also above mentioned, it lies 14 leagues westward of Plata, and extends itself along the northern coast. It is washed by the river Tagui, on whose banks are many salt pans. All those cities are much decayed and thinly inhabited, the Spaniards being the most of them drawn by the temptation of new discovered gold and silver mines. The Bishop de las Casas, an eyewitness, relates that the king Guacanario secured the goods of a stranded ship, of which Columbus was commander, and received the Spaniards very courteously, but not being able to continue supplying them with that quantity of gold they required, wanting men to gather so much out of the streams and mines. The men dying of their hard labor in the gold mines, and those which endured stoutly the cruel labor underground, were never suffered to go to their wives. Page 329. The chief towns in this island are Puerto Rico, itself commonly called St. John de Puerto Rico, so termed by Christopher Columbus as being the first land discovered by him in the year 1493. This island, which formerly is said to have been under the absolute power of one sole king, the Spaniards not much regarded at first, having enough to do with Hispaniola, where they found more gold than on Puerto Rico. Anno 1520. John Ponce de Leon obtained a commission from the court of Spain to be the chief governor of this island, and built Capara, which place was inhabited 12 years, notwithstanding it stood behind a scraggy mountain in a desert place far up in the country. But their thirst after gold, of which some veins were discovered there, made them dispense with all other inconveniences. Yet at last, beginning to be weary of this desolate and barren place of settlement, they removed to Guernica, watered by many rivers, whose sands had great quantities of gold dust. Guanica, gold dust. Imagine the sands. Imagine the sands with great quantities of gold dust when the sun is shining, walking barefoot on sands with great quantities of gold dust. Barefoot. No mics on your feet. Peter Martyr relates farther that these people, though very expert in arms, yet were oftentimes beaten by the cannibals, who at one time carried above 5,000 people out of Puerto Rico for their winter provisions. Nor was their condition bettered after the Spaniards conquered the island, for those that could not furnish them with gold were certain of death. Nor were their cruelties in other places undivulged to this people before their arrival, whereupon, as it related by Peter Ordonez de Carellos, the Caliphate Harvey, being informed of the Spaniards' approach, took an oath from his subjects that they should never discover where the gold lay, though they should be put to death for it. For said he, gold, this is him speaking about the Spaniards. Gold is their God, for which they make so many cursed blood baths. Wherever they come, therefore throw the gold into some very deep waters. For when the Spanish God is sunk, the Spaniards will lose their courage and not plague us so much for it. Page 331. The Spaniards, they have been thereby necessitated to furnish themselves with Negroes to work in their mines and sugar mills, and these also, not able to endure such hard entertainment, ran most of them away. For when a Negro did not bring gold enough home at night, his master tying him naked to a stake or post, and beat him with the rods or switches so long till the blood ran down his back, then poured boiling oil into the wounds, and then threw pepper and salt into them, and so let him lie, or else put him into a pit out of which his head appeared only. Cuba. Westward, or rather to the northwest of Hispaniola, lieth Cuba, accounted one of the four isles of Barlovento, and by Columbus upon his first discovery, called Juana, afterwards Fernandina, then Alpha and Omega, till at last the present name prevailed. It is parted from the others by a frith or narrow channel, which runneth betwixt the capes of St. Nicholas, belonging to Hispaniola, and that called Maisie, belonging to Cuba. On the north it hath a free of little islands called the Lucayes Islands, of which more in their proper place, so many and so thick scattered, that they serve for no small security and defense of the island on that side, besides a part of the peninsula of Florida, which coasteth is likewise northward. On the west it had the country of Yucatan, which is part of the continent, but at a distance of 40 or 50 leagues. On the south, Jamaica. But at a distance of 40 or 50 leagues, and on the south, Jamaica. Do y'all see the connection between the different soil portions of the Americas? I wonder what the connection between the people then and what the connection between the people now. If you notice a connection now, who knows? Maybe the connection is with your relatives. But chiefly for the expeditions of Admiral Peterson Hine, who being sent out by the West India Company to cruise up and down before Havana with 31 sail, was from thence a strong current driven down to Mantanca, where he stood from the shore, when 10 ships came just running amidst his fleet, and were all taken but one. About noon they discovered 9 ships more, which sailing along the shore got into the inlet Mantanca, where they ran aground, whither Hine following came up to them the next morning by break of day, and after a small resistance took them, being valued to be worth above 115 ton of gold. Page 337. I have seen other parts of the West Indies where the Spaniards might be fleeced of considerable quantities of riches, as at Panama, where their silver bars lie piled up in heaps in the open streets day and night without guard for 5 or 6 months together, waiting the arrival of the Armada. This island of Cuba hath adjacent to it great conveniences of salt and fishing, and in it are very great plenty of horses, neat, sheep and hogs, both wild and tame, of a far larger and better breed than any other part of America. It hath also many very rich mines of copper already open, and is the only place that supplies all the West Indies with metal for the infinite number of ordnance they have in all their ports and castles, both in the North and South Seas. But whether it hath any mines of silver or gold, I know not. Jamaica, The island of Jamaica, little north from the southern continent of America, in the sea called Mar del Norte, and south from the Isle of Cuba, about 12 leagues, and west from Hispaniola, 20 and 18 degrees of northern latitude, and beneath Berith from Rio de Jaca, northwest, 150 leagues from Santa Marta, northwest, 135 from Rio Grande, northwest, 130 from Cartagena, north, 14 from Puerto Bello, northeast, and by north, 190 from the Bay of Darien, north, and by east, 170 from the Bay of Mexico, 150. New Andalusia, eastward of Darien and the Gulf of Yoruba, lieth the country of New Andalusia, otherwise called Cartagena, from the name of its principal city. On the east it hath the country called Saint Martha. On the north the main ocean and New Granada. Toward the south it is for the most part a mountainous country and full of woods, which they say yield abundance of rosin, gums, and some very good balsams. Also a sort of long pepper, much sharper than that of East India. And they're familiar with East India. They knew this wasn't that. And according to the customs of the country, not without good store of gold and other jewels, according to the quality and condition of the person that was buried, of which the Spaniards soon gained intelligence, and in ransacking the graves, sort of how they do in Egypt, the grave robbers, now calling themselves Egyptologists, soon gained intelligence, and in ransacking the graves and monuments of the dead, and supposed to have found an infinite mass of treasure. It's probably in a museum somewhere. The inhabitants of old suffered great prejudice by tigers and serpents. Tigers. Yet, nevertheless, this country was very populous before the Spaniards' arrival here. The natives wore cotton, King Cotton. The natives wore cotton aprons before, and golden rings about their arms and legs, as also strings of pearl and the like. The women here, as in the rest of these parts, went with their husbands into wars and behaved themselves valiantly, shooting poisoned arrows, insomuch that Martin Ambesis took a maid anno 1509 who had killed 28 Spaniards. And you thought the people from the earth soil portion that we call Europe, you thought these people came over here. Even the king's men had problems. To the province Cartagena belongs also the country Yoruba, which is so fruitful that all kind of Spanish trees and seeds grow better here than in Spain, besides which it hath its own fruit, as also abundance of pine and palm trees, whose leaves serve for brooms. The Guyana tree bears a sharp kind of fruit like a lemon. The guaravana, a kind of citrons. The mamisa, a fruit not unlike an orange, but tasting like a melon, and the hovos, a great plum. The Conquest of America. Tzvetan Todorov, translated by Richard Howard. Svetin Todorov, 1939. Columbus's writings, diaries, letters, reports. Gold, or rather the search for it, for not much is found at the start, is omnipresent in the course of Columbus's first voyage. On the very day following the discovery, October 13th, 1492, he already notes in his diary, I was attentive and worked hard to know if there was any gold. And he returns to this subject unceasingly. I do not wish to delay, but to discover and go to many islands to find gold. The admiral ordered that nothing should be taken in order that they might surmise that the admiral wanted nothing but gold. His very prayer has become, Our Lord, in his goodness, guide me that I may find this gold. And in a subsequent report, Memorial for Antonio de Torres, he alludes laconically to our activity, which is to gather gold. The signs he believes he has found of the presence of gold also determine his route. I decided to go to the southwest to search for gold and precious stones. This is from his journal. He wished to go to the island which they call Venego, where he had news, as he understood, that there was much gold. The admiral believed that he was very near to the source and that our Lord would show him where the gold was born. For gold is born in this period. Thus Columbus wanders from island to island, for it is quite possible that the Indians had thereby found a means of getting rid of him. At break of day, he made sail in order to lay a course in search of the islands that the Indians told him had much gold, and some of which had more gold than earth. Is it then no more than greed that sent Columbus on his journey? Quite simply, Columbus knows the lure value of wealth, and of gold in particular. By the promise of gold, he reassures others in difficult moments. Not only the sailors hoped to grow rich, the very backers of the expedition, the rulers of Spain, would not have ventured upon the enterprise without the hope of a profit, since the journal Columbus keeps is intended for them. Signs of the presence of gold must appear on every page. On the occasion of the third voyage, the organization of the first, Columbus says quite explicitly that gold was, in some sense, the lure he offered so that the monarchs would agree to finance him. On another occasion, he says he has gathered and preserved gold so that their highnesses might be pleased and might thus judge this situation on the basis of a number of large stones filled with gold. Letter to Doña Juana de Torres, November 1500. Columbus seeks the routes that would permit this desire to be realized. Infinitely more than gold, the spread of Christianity is Columbus's heart's desire. And he has set forth his feelings in the case very explicitly, notably in a letter to the Pope. His future voyage would be to the glory of the Holy Trinity, and to that of the holy Christian religion. And for this he hopes for the victory of God, the eternal, as he has ever granted it to me in the past. What he does is great and magnifying for the glory and growth of the holy Christian religion. He made his point. On December 26, 1492, during the first voyage, Columbus reveals in his journal that he hopes to find gold, and that in so great quantity that the sovereigns within 3 years would undertake and prepare to go and conquer the holy places. For so says he, I declared to your highness that all the gain of this my enterprise should be spent in the conquest of Jerusalem. He was a most jealous keeper of the honor of God, eager to convert the peoples and to see the seed and faith of Jesus Christ spread everywhere. He succeeded, and especially devoted to the hope that God would make him worthy of helping to win back the Holy Sepulchre. And in this devotion and to confidence which he had that God would help him in the discovery of this world which he promised, he begged Queen Isabella to make a vow that she would spend all the wealth gained by the crown as a result of the discovery in winning back the land and the house of Jerusalem, which the queen did. One of his correspondents, Mohsen Jaume Ferrer, had written him in 1495. The great part of valuable things come from very hot regions of which the inhabitants are black or parrots. One of his correspondents, Mohsen Jaume Ferrer, had written him in 1495. The great part of valuable things come from very hot regions, of which the inhabitants are black or parrots. Blacks and parrots are therefore considered as the signs, the proofs of heat, and heat as the sign of wealth. It is hardly surprising that Columbus never fails to remark the abundance of parrots, the blackness of skins, and the intensity of the heat. The Indians who come upon the ship had understood that the admiral wanted a parrot. Now we know why. During the third voyage, he heads farther south. Here, the people are extremely black. The search for the location of terra firma, the mainland, represents another striking example of this behavior. On the first voyage, Columbus recorded the pertinent information in his journal. This island, Hispaniola, or Haiti, or the other island, Yamaya, or Jamaica, was only 10 days by canoe from the mainland, which would be 60 to 70 leagues. And here the people do not go naked, but are clothed. He has his conviction, namely that the island of Cuba is a part of the continent Asia, and he decides to eliminate all information tending to prove the contrary. The Indians Columbus encounters have told him that this land, Cuba, is an island. The human side of the Spaniards is their thirst for earthly possessions, gold. From the beginning, as we have seen, and soon after, women. There is a striking example of this in the remarks of one Indian reported by Columbus. The Indian says, the human side of the Spaniards is their thirst for earthly possessions, gold, from the beginning, as we have seen, and soon after, women. There is a striking example of this in the remarks of one Indian reported by Columbus. One of the Indians taken by the admiral spoke with their king, telling him how the Christians came from the sky and that they were seeking gold. The Christians are generous with their religion, which they bring to the new world. From it, they take in exchange gold and wealth. I saw the lords from Mexico who are coming with them. If these were slaves, why would they be wearing turquoise collars round their necks and rich blankets and green plumages as they do? The Spaniards' behavior remains incomprehensible to them. You see the distinction between the Mexicans and the Spaniards? I saw the lords from Mexico who are coming with them. Who are the indigenous Mexicans? Who are the Mexicans? Who are the Mexicans to you? Are you sure? I saw the lords from Mexico who are coming with them. If these were slaves, why would they be wearing turquoise collars round their necks and rich blankets and great plumages as they do? The Spaniards' behavior remains incomprehensible to them. Now they copy the Spaniards' behavior. Why do they want this gold? These gods must eat it. That could be the only reason they want so much. Cortés apparently had offered this explanation. The Spaniards need gold as the cure for a sickness. The Indians, who identify gold with excrement, find this difficult to accept. Hanged many Indian women, and from their feet he also hanged the infant children. There the Spaniards committed the most unheard of cruelties. They cut off hands, arms, and legs and women's breasts, and they threw the Indians into deep lakes and stabbed the children because they could not walk as fast as their mothers. If those whom they had chained together by the neck fell ill or did not walk as fast as the others, they cut off their heads so as not to have to stop to release them. And to conclude this macabre enumeration, a detail reported by Alonso de Zorita around 1570. I had known an order judge to say publicly from his dais, speaking in a loud voice, that if water were lacking to irrigate the Spaniards' farms, they would have to be watered with the blood of Indians. Torture is inflicted in order to discover the hiding places of treasure. If anyone should ask, what has been the cause of so many evils? I would answer, covetousness, the desire to store in one's chest a few bars of gold. Las Casas, I do not say that they want to kill them, the Indians, directly. From the hate they bear them, they kill them because they want to be rich and have much gold. The desire for riches is nothing new. The passion for gold has nothing specifically modern about it. Gold obviously wasn't natural. Actually, they may have been familiar with gold. It was hard to understand by the Indians or the indigenous people or properly the Americans. Just hard to understand. It's like adorning yourself with leaves from one of a million trees. It's hard to understand why these leaves are so valuable and incite such violence. The desire for riches is nothing new. The passion for gold has nothing specifically modern about it. Some people, you know these people, some group of people, maybe the Americans, I don't know, but some group of people adorn themselves with these things. And it's very natural. There's no effort in it. It's very natural. And it's almost a must. Early History of the Creek Indians and Their Neighbors by John R. Swanton. Hawkins' chronicler describes the gold and silver found in Florida at considerable length, but to much the same purport. Gold and silver they want not, for at the Frenchmen's first coming thither, they had the same offered them for little or nothing, for they received for a hatchet 2 pound weight of gold, because they knew not the estimation thereof. But the soldiers, being greedy of the same, did take it from them, giving them nothing for it. And how they came of this gold and silver, the Frenchmen knew not as yet. It seemeth they had estimation of their gold and silver, for it is wrought flat and grown, which they wear about their necks. Others some made round like a pancake, with the hole in the middle, with the hole in the midst, to bolster up their breast withal. And how they came of this gold and silver the Frenchmen know not as yet. It seemeth they had estimation of their gold and silver, for it is wrought flat and grown, which they wear about their necks. Others some made round like a pancake, with the hole in the midst, to bolster up their breast withal. But that in the main, where are high hills, may be gold and silver as well as in Mexico, because it is all one main. Where you at in there? Where your 4 grandparents was born at in there? Your 8 great grandparents, your 16 second grades, your 32 third grades, your 64 fourth grades, 128 fifth grades, 256 sixth grades. Where they at? Where was they born at in there? Them the Americans. And if they the Americans, what the fuck is you? Do the right thing.